Welcome back. You're watching Inside Politics on KTN News. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the 1 billion donation from the World Bank for the COVID-19 response here in the country, which we did get a breakdown from the Cabinet Secretary, Mutahi Kagwe, on some itemized things, how some of the monies were spent. We have a statement from the permanent principal secretary in the Ministry of Health, Susan Mochache, intimating that this money has not been spent yet, and in fact should be appearing before the National Assembly's Health Committee tomorrow to put more perspective into this, answer to more questions on this. We're now joined by Kipchumba Karori, also joining us from our City Center studios. Kipchumba, good morning. Welcome to the program. Give us your thoughts on what's happening at the Ministry of Health. Are we staring at yet another scandal from the so-called Afya House cartels?
Thank you, Ben. I think what we need to decipher from the whole scandal or from the whole Afya House issue is the problem that has always been there in the Afya House, the cartels and all the problems that have always been teething from the minister who was there before and even to Mutahi Kagwe. What is just happening now is that we find a CS who has some public communication skills and a little PR here and there. But the public and the PS and the cabinet secretary must be alive to the fact that it is at the Afya House that we have these what we call the disaster industrialists. You remember there was a point we had, we procured some clinics and they remained in Mombasa. They have never been to this part of the country and nobody to date has ever been taken to court. And when we come to the issue of the COVID funds, one asks the question, why will the PS read from a different script and the CS read from a different script? From what we know, the itemized budget we saw is what the CS presented to Parliament. But when we heard from the PS was that these are monies that have not been spent. The question is, why do we spend so much money in things that are not essential and nobody is addressing the essential things? The other thing, if this is the way to go, there is 6 billion that is supposed to come to this ministry from the World Bank. Why don't the minister give us the tentative budget of how the money will be absorbed so that the same can be detected early enough? Two, there is the aspect of conflict of interest. There have been reports going around that the CS is engaged in business within the ministry. We also need to see that coming to an end. And then this is the time we need Kinoti and Nurdin Haji to swing into action so that we can get some funds to whatever it was intention to do. We cannot be receiving donor money and spending it on mandazis and other things that are not important to this. The other question we need to ask is, before this money came, the Ministry of Health had a budget. Where is that budget and how is it being utilized?
All right. Chero, we are hoping that we will get more answers from the PS, who is also the Chief Accounting Officer in the Ministry of Health tomorrow, and also from the CS, who has promised Kenyans that he will get to the bottom of it. But listening to Mark, Mark was alluding to the fact that these are two heads of a ministry, heading the ministry in two different directions, insinuating that the CS is trying to institute some change positively in the Ministry of Health. What's your take on this?
Sorry, I hope I heard you correctly. The connection is not that good. But, I just want to say that at the end of the day, much as we might try to segregate responsibilities, I think that the buck stops with the cabinet secretary. In the same way, if we talk about what's happening in Kenya today, the buck stops with His Excellency, the President of the Republic. If you have taken on responsibility, then you have accountability leading all the way to your doorstep, regardless of who was initiating or instituting that corruption. For me to see the CS have to come up and defend himself against allegations of conflict of interest, which are allegations, obviously, made me sad because it reminded me that ultimately there are very few good, and I will say allegedly bad, because this still allegations, but there are very few good people out there who can stand up and not be tainted by any kind of conflict of interest. And about corruption, it is inertia. You know, you cannot say we have COVID-19 and therefore corruption stops so that we can save lives. Yes, that is what we want ideally. And that is why we have pushed for a multi-sectoral, multidisciplinary team to come in and say, all bets are off. Let's put our hands on deck. Let's see how we can make this work as rapidly and quickly for the benefit of all Kenyans. But that is not what is happening. The CAS yesterday, Dr. Mwangangi said very interestingly, she quipped and said, you know, it's Ministry of Health, not Ministry of Coronavirus. And that was an interesting statement that stayed with me because yes, there's two things we're looking at. Ministry of Health in its entirety, Afya House and its operations over the years, looting and plundering and mismanaging billions of shillings. And then there's the coronavirus response. My interest is in the coronavirus response right now. We shall revisit all these things. We cannot resolve the corruption that exists in the Ministry of Health while we are trying to test and save lives. That said, the buck still stops with CS Mutahi Kagwe. And even though he took over from CS Cicely Karaoke, I had already said a month or two ago that he ought to step down if he's unable to tell us what happened to the 239 people that landed on that from that China airline in Kenya, and we still don't know where they are despite court orders. So from the beginning, we have seen, or I have seen, a disaster in the making, and this is just par for the course. The contradictions, the lies, the subterfuge, and so on and so forth will keep us occupied, but in actual fact, we should be focused on saving lives. So no matter what the public health and clinical health teams are trying to do to ensure that we arrest the spread of coronavirus, corruption will always be that sore thumb sticking out, interfering with and interrupting the operations. So as I said a few weeks ago when I was last on the show, I said I wish CS Mutahi Kagwe every bit of good luck as he's battling his own conflict of interest allegations, at the same time trying to deal with mafias that have ravaged and destroyed and mixed up our health service provision in Kenya for many, many years.
All right, thanks, Chero. Rosalind, let's stay with Mutahi Kagwe, the CS, shall we? We have reports that he has, or is in the process, or has instituted the transfer of some 30 procurement officers from the Ministry of Health in a bid to clean up the place. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, Ben, last week we were told that 30 officers had actually been moved from the ministry and others might follow suit. And the question is, if the ministry is at the center of this controversy, he owes it to the public to tell us who are these officers that have been moved and what is the reason why they have been moved, because I don't think moving the officers is a solution. Kenyans should have actually been able to know by name these people, what are their portfolio, what informed the decision to move them, because transferring somebody to another ministry and they're implicated in corruption or other illegalities just means that you're transferring that problem from one ministry to the other. But just to come back to that, this money we're talking about is World Bank money. This is a pandemic that has distracted the lives of all Kenyans. When Kenyans had full confidence in the ministry, and then this budget comes in raising very fundamental questions, then we put the government to task to us, are they really committed to helping Kenyans? And even with the World Bank, because if you look at what the National Treasury CS said, that the first time we received 1 billion. Later on, the World Bank has given us 5 billion. So we are talking about 6 billion from the World Bank. We are also now in the process of securing another 100 billion from the World Bank. So as a country, as we grapple with this issue of the accountability, do you think that we'll be able to convince the World Bank to give us the additional 100 million loan and be sure that that money will actually be spent as per the requirement? Yes, the president said that the money will be accounted to the last penny. But in terms of public confidence in the ministry and the leadership now, can they guarantee to Kenyans that this money will be put to the right use? And also, in addition to that, the EU has actually advanced a grant of 20 billion again to the pandemic. So how sure are we again that this money that is coming in will be used? Because we are not talking about the budget that had been allocated to the ministry. We are talking about this money coming. We are talking about so many issues that are affecting this ministry, because even in terms of quarantine and in terms of isolation, if you talk to the people who are working there, the service providers, they're actually not getting the right equipment. They're not actually getting the masks, the things that they're supposed to do. We are also having questions on the donation that we received from Jack Ma. The government has not come out to tell us that, yes, this is what we received, this is what has been done to the donations that we got. So I think where the CS sits now, I think it's not the best place to sit now, but he really has a lot to actually restore the confidence that Kenyans had in him and that has been eroded in the last days.
So Dismas, if PS Mochache is a chief accounting officer in this, and all eyes on her to hear what kind of answers she's going to provide tomorrow, yet they seem to be reading from different scripts, you know, with his boss, the CS Mutahi Kagwe. Where does this leave the CS where, as we have said here, the buck stops?
Well, you know, when you look at Afya House, it's a very good Tower of Babel. So you have a PS driving towards Kisumu, you have the CS driving towards Mombasa, and they're supposed to be having a meeting. And that is not happening. There's so much confusion at Afya House that at the end of the day, there's nothing substantive coming out of it. Number one, Kenya is probably the only country in the world today which has been given resources to fight COVID. And instead of the money going to assist Mora and Wanjiko and Nafula, the money is said to be disappearing into pockets of public servants of rank. And while this is happening, we cannot be naive enough to start saying that the principal responsibility stops with the chief accounting officer and the CS is as clean as they say, very clean, mweupe kama pamba. The political responsibility stops with him. If for some reason there's too much eating in the kitchen and he cannot deliver, then he needs to go and see the appointing authority and say that, Mr. President, I cannot deliver, I'm not going to resign. Because you're not going to be the Minister for Health or CS for Health while resources are being plundered under your watch and you sit pretty and you say, because I'm not the accounting officer, all I can do is call a news conference. But when the two officers are fighting, where is President Kenyatta? Because the responsibility really stops with President Kenyatta. And we need to ask several questions. Is he aware that the two officers are driving in two different directions? And if he's aware, what is he going to do about it? Because, you know, these two officers serve at his pleasure. And as the President of the Republic of Kenya, his principal responsibility when he was sworn into office for the second term, as well as the first time, he said he was going to protect lives and properties. World Bank has given us resources to protect lives, and under his watch, we are being told the money is disappearing. It's only in Kenya, and you know, if you're not very careful, you'll be sliding south, that you have the principal secretary contradicting the cabinet secretary, and she's still at the workplace. Or the two of them are contradicting each other. Because at this stage, you don't know who is saying the truth and who is lying. It may be as well that it's the CS who is lying, or it could be the PS who is lying. But you see, Mora doesn't care about who is lying. Mora wants to be sure that if she gets tested tomorrow for COVID, and she's positive and she goes to quarantine, the money from the World Bank is going to pay for this. Mora wants to be sure that all these people, the healthcare workers, the frontline soldiers, they need PPEs. And then there's this small issue of Mandazi. We need to really be careful about how we treat our healthcare workers because, you know, some of them work for shifts of maybe up to 12 hours, 8 hours, some even for 24 hours. So in principle, there's nothing wrong in giving them a cup of tea, even if you're going to spend 10 million. You know, these are our brothers and sisters. They're dedicating themselves to fighting COVID. If the money is meant to buy them tea, mandazis, or even whiskey, let them enjoy that benefit while they're taking a break. Like, for instance, if people are going to do mass testing, say they go to Kawangware for 12 hours, don't you expect them to be given a cup of tea or refreshments? Or do you want them to do their testing for 12 hours while they're yawning away? Maybe what we need to ask ourselves is that if the money is going to the healthcare workers, let it buy them tea and coffee. But we shouldn't see people in the next few days buying properties all over Nairobi, and Mora or the healthcare workers are frustrated.
Well said. Mark, let me come to you. 4 weeks ago, the good CS Mutahi Kagwe was being showered with a lot of praise for the way he was leading the health ministry, very commanding, very much in charge. That seems to have changed a lot. I mean, whenever Kenyans see such things like what we are seeing now, they've been beaten so many times in terms of theft of public funds. Would you blame them for having all these questions around Mutahi Kagwe and the way he's leading the ministry?
I wouldn't blame them at all, but I would ask them to look at this with a bit of caution. Why am I talking about caution? Let us remember that we had a CS there before, and trust you me, we should thank God that we have Mutahi Kagwe and not the former CS, and I say that without fear of contradiction. Mutahi Kagwe has done a good job. But let's remember, and I keep insisting on this point, he has not been on the job long enough for him to effect any of the radical changes that that ministry needs for it to be able to perform. Let's just be clear straight off the bat. He got into the ministry and the rot that has been there is still there. Now, is he cleaning shop? Then that's what we need to check. Has he been able to begin to transfer the procurement officers that have been used before by cartels? He's begun that process.
Mark,
I would ask Kenyans.
Yes. If I can interrupt you a bit.
Yes,
I'm not focusing. I'm not interested in the cartels and what we've had at Afya House. I'm talking about the way he has been managing the ministry since the breakout of this COVID-19 global pandemic.
Yes, and Ben, to be honest with you, if you look at the numbers in Kenya, if in fact you also include the community infections, if you look at the tracing, if you look at how much effort has been made to keep Kenyans safe, and compare that to what countries like Uganda, Tanzania, even Ghana, further afield, have been able to do, if you compare apples for apples, then the Ministry of Health, under the leadership of Mutahi Kagwe, has had a sufficient reaction to COVID-19, especially given the fact that somehow we've managed to keep our country going, we've managed to keep certain sectors of the economy going without seeing the thousands of infections that would have happened were we not managing this crisis right. To that effect, Mutahi Kagwe has done a good job. What I'm separating here is the financials and how to deal with the corruption within the Ministry of Health. It's not a short game, it is not a sprint, it is a long game, and we need to give him enough time to see whether he's going to be able to do that or not. That's why I said we need to be cautiously optimistic.
All right. Kipchumba, this is where we are right now. The Ministry of Health is at the center of this global pandemic. We are right at the center of it. And what Kenyans care about now is the response to it. Where do we go from here? Where do we get the answers? Where do we make sure that we don't let corruption, the usual corruption, unfortunately so, does not derail or put us in a worse place in this fight against the COVID-19 global pandemic?
Ben, I think we should not mix two things. We should not delude ourselves with the issue of the responses that we have had to COVID-19 and the financial accountability that Mutahi Kagwe must take as the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Health. You understand that the CS is the representative of the President at that ministry. So the person taking responsibility, political and otherwise, is Mutahi Kagwe. In terms of the use of finances, since inception of that ministry, the Ministry of Health has been a criminal enterprise. Look at it this way. How comes we are told people have misappropriated money, instead of them being punished by the law, they are transferred within ministries? Why are we trying to massage people who have misused and plundered public money? We need to tell Mutahi Kagwe, we will ask more questions going forward, because we feel that the money that has been given by World Bank has not been utilized well. And we cannot look at another example, Ben. You tell people that Kemri has run out of testing kits. Immediately, you fire somebody who was the head of that institution. The next thing you are told is that restaurants will be opening, and what will be happening is that you have to test these people, the workers of a restaurant, at the cost of the restaurant. Why do we try to do that? Instead of helping all these people and testing them for free, and again, what we need to do, if we are to open an economy without passing the cost to the Kenyans, we need to make sure that we budget for the funds from World Bank to cushion Kenyans from some of these things. Because COVID was not the mistake of the people who own restaurants in this country, or it is not the mistake of government. All of us must bear the burden.
Okay. Charo, very quick.
And moving forward, Ben.
Yes, Kipchumba.
Moving forward, I think what we must do, the issue of the PS and the CS speaking in different languages should be done with, because the president has the ultimate authority. If Mochache and Kagwe are not working together, get Kagwe another PS and we move on.
Why not get, all right. Interesting there from Kipchumba. Charo, very quickly, this is where we are. 1 billion, 1.3 billion from the World Bank is what we are talking about. We are expecting another 2.5 billion from the World Bank. What needs to happen, in your opinion?
You know, I find it absolutely incredible that not only the World Bank, but also other bilateral and multilateral donors continue to pour money into the sinkhole, into the bottomless pit that is Kenya. We know about the corruption, and they're still pushing money in. They're still funneling money in. Are they complicit? Are they part of this? Why is it that they do not understand and recognize the pitfalls? So at the end of the day, they will report back and say that they supported Kenya in COVID response, but did they? I completely agree with Kipchumba. At the end of the day, we have not taken care of the people who we are supposed to take care of with these funds. These funds are going into the same inertia of corruption from time immemorial. And these funds will not be used for the purposes intended. And madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So as far as I'm concerned, I am completely sure that the World Bank and all these other donors who are pouring money into Kenya are complicit because they do not tackle it. Are their taxpayers aware of the type of things that are happening with their money, buying tea, renting vehicles, that people are speaking from different sides of the mouth? So at the end of the day, Kenyans have not been taken care of during this response. And I have said, a non-people-centered approach to the coronavirus response will invariably fail. And this is what we're going to see. Whether we go for aggressive mass testing or we try to lock people down, people will not cooperate because they can see with their very eyes that the money that's supposed to be supporting the country and supporting them is not going to them. It's not helping them. People are locked out of their homes. People are homeless. People are sick. They have underlying conditions. But these things are not being addressed. What we see now is endless discussions about how much money was spent on tea. This is the shame that Kenya is. And I want to categorically here say shame on you to the World Bank as well for continuing to do so without putting any measures in place to ensure that the inertia of corruption in the Ministry of Health does not also erode whatever gains we may have been making or we may try to make or we would make during the COVID-19 response.
Thank you. Dismas, as we close on this very quickly, do you think the World Bank needs to take its fair share of the blame in this?
Well, you know, World Bank, as the people who give us money, they need to ensure that the strict procurement procedures are followed and that no money goes into the people's pockets. But another interesting issue is when we claim that Mutahi Kagwe is a success, what actually are the success factors and who defines that success? Are we comparing Kenya, which has done about 23,000 tests, to South Africa, which has done about 50,000, or to Burundi, which has done 0,000 tests? How do we define that Mutahi Kagwe now is a success? What are the parameters? Would we say that when we go to Mombasa and people refuse to go for testing because they don't know how they're going to be treated as a quarantine, is that a factor that we can use to determine success? Are we going to say Kenya is a success because now Mutahi Kagwe says if you're running an upmarket restaurant and you can afford that testing, please open it. Never mind that there'll be community transmission. So how do we really define success? And these are the issues we're supposed to be asking. And the World Bank is supposed to zoom in. And the idea of giving people tea, in my view, is a very good thing because these are human beings. They run on food. If they're going to work for 12 hours, please give them a cup of tea. However, that should not be the priority. Priority should be supplying them with the PPEs. Because right now we are told part of the reason why the government can't do enough testing is because they don't have those kits. And then you are told 70 million has gone into communications. And the CS says, wait a minute, I've got a PR firm, but it's not my firm doing this business. Now, can you go the extra mile and tell us who is actually doing this production and who has gone with the 70 million? Because we are told that for all the airtime and print space given, the media houses in Kenya are giving it pro bono. So please tell us, where has this 70 million gone to? You've said in black and white it's not your organization. But which organization is producing this, and where has this money landed? Now, if you don't give this kind of communication to Mura will no longer trust what you tell us. If you tell us today you've tested 1,000 people and 10 have been found to be positive, Mura is not going to trust you.
Roslyn, very quickly, what are you expecting from the PS tomorrow, and how is this supposed to go?
Okay, what I expect with the PS, he talked about the social workers who are actually in hospitals, in the isolation centers, in the quarantine facilities, to just look at the financial status of those who are there and see who are to benefit from government and who are to pay for themselves. I think there should not be any discrimination. Everybody should be catered for because government is getting money from multinationals and bilateral partners. Two, I think the opening of restaurants should actually be looked at because it's going to be another place for corruption. Because when you tell the hotel owners to ensure that their staffs have been tested and shoulder the burden of payment, some of them will actually just get the documents and show. So I think that is another way that should be looked at. And I think the investigating agencies should actually move in so that Kenyans should actually see that this money that we are getting from donors is actually well spent as per the agreements.
All right. We're keeping an eye on what's happening in the Ministry of Health at Afya House. We're keeping our cameras trained on the CS Mutahi Gagwe and his PS, Susan Mochache, as she prepares to appear before the National Assembly's Health Committee tomorrow. When we come back after this quick commercial break, we'll switch gears to some politics now and focus on the Jubilee Party marriage, which has been on the rocks for quite some time. The divorce proceedings, quite noisy and messy. Now, the party has publicly announced that the 5 members to the National Management Committee is in effect the Ruto faction is taking this to court. We understand. Are they even taking it to the Uhuru Kenyatta family? The Sunday Standard headline is Ruto Camp Ultimatum to Ruto. And the Sunday Nation reports Ruto allies take fight to Uhuru family. Stick around for that.